Hey everyone, it's Robert Hall, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Aputure 600C. Now if you followed this channel for a while, you would know that Aputure is not the brand that I've used in the past for LED products. But as I do more video work, I find that this is all I see. Aputure products everywhere. Every agency that I'm working with and production team that I'm working with, everybody is using Aputure products, and it just makes sense for that to be the products that I'm using. Now the Aputure 600C has been out for a while already, so I don't think that there's really a need to dive too deep into the specs. Instead, I want to focus this video on who I think this works best for and what my experience has been with it so far. But let's briefly hit the specs anyways. It's a 600 watt lamp, it has a dust and water resistant body, we've got a 13-pound lamp head, an 11.5-pound control box, and when the case is fully packed with its cables and accessories, it weighs 32 pounds. It's RGBWW, meaning it's capable of producing any RGB value, Kelvin control from 2300 all the way up to 10,000, and tint control. We've got 4 different dimming curves and control down to 0.1% increment. CRI across the bicolor temperatures is in the 96 to 97 range, and I did confirm that. The control box features 2 V-mount battery plates, which can run the light at 50% power. The 600C does include a clamp for easily attaching the control box to the stand. The control box has 4 buttons and 1 dial, which is a little bit cumbersome considering the amount of features and adjustments that you can make on the Aputure 600C, but what anyone will tell you is that using the Link app is a far better way of controlling this light, as well as any of the Aputure and Amaran lights out there. That's a good quick overview, but let's talk about using this light in different environments. Indoors, the Aputure 600C is an absolute powerhouse. It's highly capable of lighting large spaces even if you're bouncing or using very diffuse, very soft modifiers. And in this environment is where my favorite feature of this light really shines, and that is tint control. Now you can use the built-in gels, whether you're using the Link app to control it or you're actually on the device dialing it in. There's a whole suite of Roscoe and Lee gels, but to me that goes out the window as soon as you use another modifier, because every modifier is going to slightly alter the white balance and possibly even the tint. So if you gel a light to attain a certain color and then throw a modifier on it, well, it's kind of getting gelled again, or it's at least not exactly what the gel is anymore. So instead, the workflow that I adopted was using a colorimeter to identify the ambient temperature and tint, and then matching that color temperature by manually dialing it in and making sure it matches on a C800 colorimeter. The bicolor and the tint control also really give you the freedom to do some unconventional things in terms of lighting. Here's an example of a scene I did in a restaurant where we used a decorative curtain as our diffusion light source on our key light, the 600C. I wouldn't even consider this with a daylight or a bicolor LED, because there would be no method of controlling the tint that comes from those curtains, which are certainly not designed to be a light source. Now outdoors, the 600C is pretty capable in close proximity. In a shaded environment, I think you're just fine. Even with soft modifiers, the 600C is going to balance pretty well. Even in the sunlight, there were scenarios where I could use the Aputure 600C in a soft modifier and balance with the sun, like using the sun as a hair light, like this example. But I think you'll find when doing this, you're going to be restricted to keeping the light quite close. Now here's where a decision comes into play, because the Aputure 600D Pro is 1 stop brighter at daylight, and that extra output comes in handy huge when you are in a bright outdoor environment. That just means that you can get your light further away or use softer modifiers. So if you're always working against daylight, I do think that the 600D would be a better fit. And the reason for these differences is because as you add different LEDs that are capable of producing different colors, that simply means that the color blending technology needs to be more aggressive, and therefore it's going to cut more of the output. Next, let's talk about RGB and effects. The 600C is loaded with that RGBWW chip. That means it's capable of producing any color. You can create effects where it pulses between colors or changes the brightness to kind of create these practical effects. Obviously, that's a headline feature of the 600C, but it's one that I almost never used. Now that's not to say I don't use RGB. I just did a shoot that was at an arcade and we loaded that up with RGB. However, I did it using lights like the Aputure MC, Aputure MC Pro, the Infinibar. All of those lights have a very small, very compact or slim form factor that simply allows them to be positioned really close and be hidden very easily. The 600C simply can't replicate the utility of those really tiny form factors that are easy to hide and easy to create this light that falls off quickly, which is just how I'm always approaching RGB lights. Now understand that my work is largely commercial focused for business business where the color palettes are typically pretty safe or neutral, if you will. If you're instead working on music videos, product videos, or just other creative projects, well then RGB control might be the #1 aspect of a light to you. Oh, and if that is you, I'd like to point out one other handy feature of this light. The 600C allows you to select an RGB color and then alter the white balance on top of that. Because as you change white balance, you change the perception of the colors. So having that feature allows you to identify exactly what color you want on the screen and then alter it to the white balance that you're shooting at, which is very helpful for maintaining accurate colors. Now there's definitely some decisions to be made here. The Aputure 600D Pro is $600 cheaper than the Aputure 600C. And again, it is one stop more powerful at daylight white balance, but then you're giving up all those other colors and all of that tint control. And then you've got the 600X Pro, which is somewhere in the middle because it does offer bicolor. It's still more powerful than the 600C, albeit a little bit less than the 600D, but you don't have tint control and you don't have RGB control. It's cool that there is a light for each possible user, and you really just got to look at the type of work that you want to create to determine which of these lights would best fit your needs. And for me, after working with this on about 5 different projects, I have found that tint control is more paramount than everything else. And if there is an instance where I feel that I'm going to need more output, I'm simply going to be considering their brighter options like the 1500 and 2600 watt options. All right guys, those are my candid thoughts on the Aputure 600C. I will be following up with videos on the Aputure MC Pro and the Aputure Infinibar, which I've been using as well. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.